What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Ryan Moody, Jimmy Smith, our MMA Show, UFC 249. There was a time we felt like we did these every week, and now it's been months. And Jimmy, I could have went and watched your preview and built the ultimate anti-Jimmy Smith card, but I didn't, so I'm interested to see how our picks are going to go. So we're going to start this with Greg Hardy and Yorgan de Castro. Castro comes in off a win off Justin Tafa. He fights the way... If you think about it this way, he fights the way we expect to see Greg Hardy lose. Comes out early with leg kicks, uses that to set up the right or the left hook, wears down his opponent. Generally, he won't step inside until he's landed a handful of leg shots. Now, Greg Hardy comes off and we're going to really reference a lot of past shows here, a loss to Alexander Volkov. Check that one in the history books of our library. A very uninspired fight by both of them, to be fair. But, you know, to me, when I look at Greg Hardy, yes, he's inexperienced. But, you know, he is learning quickly. I think he's transferring his athletic abilities over better than a lot of people give him credit for. I mean, look at a guy like CM Punk that comes in and really doesn't transfer over. And I know there's age and all that stuff there. But, you know, the fact of the matter is Greg Hardy has the power to match most of the people in the division. He probably needs to work on his pacing just a bit. And whether he's got his inhaler or not, I think he just has the athletic pedigree to win over guys like this and fighters really that he can just make look like a step down. Now, he's not probably going to get big wins, as we saw against Volkov. He's probably not going to be big names. But I think he will continue to make people tune in on the hopes that he will get knocked out. It's just not likely to happen here.
You sure you didn't watch my breakdown?
Positive. I wanted to so bad.
You're not lying to me? Look, that's pretty much what I said, is that this is the kind of heavyweight that guys like Greg Hardy are going to beat. He's just a better athlete than most heavyweights. He started too late, and he doesn't really have the skill set to beat elite guys. Volkov is one of those guys where, you know, a couple wins he's in title contention. You know, let's be honest, you know, rangy heavyweight, very versatile. What I look for, and I've said this a million times, and I'll continue saying it, at heavyweights, it's, you know, what's that X factor? When you look at elite heavyweights, it isn't just, I'm a big guy who's a good athlete and hits hard. There's usually some X factor that separates them from the pack, right? I just don't see that in Greg Hardy. I don't see that pack separating talent. I don't see that pack separating skill set, but he's going to win these kinds of fights, meaning big heavyweights that come in and hit hard. He's going to be too athletic for most of those guys. The mid-level opening fight of a big pay-per-view, main event of a fight night, top of the prelim, those kind of guys Greg Hardy's going to beat. And if the UFC's smart, which they are going to keep Greg Hardy in this position and keep him away from those elite heavyweights that aren't old. The next thing I see Greg Hardy getting, honestly, and I do pick him to win this fight, is some kind of former champ who's just a little past their prime or way past their prime. You get what I'm saying? I think that's the next thing they might throw him against, is an experienced, tough, former top heavyweight who just doesn't quite have it anymore, has too many miles on him. But he's not going to beat an elite guy in his prime. But make your money in these positions, and that's what the UFC is doing.
I guess we could sum that up by saying there's a distinct reason that this is opening the main card rather than Oleinik in Verdum, who's behind on the prelim. Yeah. And there's a massive reason why we're not seeing Francis Ngannou later in the card fighting at heavyweight against Greg Hardy. They know what they're doing.
Exactly. They know what they're doing with Greg Hardy. He'll kick it off with some fun athletic ability, especially at heavyweight, but he's not going to beat those next level guys. I think that's where he spends his career. And there are these certain guys who, and I'm trying to think who else. I was Smiling Sam Alvey, right? Who's on the prelim. He made a whole career in the middle of the division. He spent his whole career not even getting close to the top, right? But had a lot of fights and made a decent amount of money. And, you know, so you can make a career in the Gleison Tibau, for example, those fighters that never got to the top, but they kept fighting and made a decent career, kind of just floating around in the center. And it could be that's where Greg Hardy, and especially with his name being in the NFL and all that stuff, he'll make more money than most staying in the middle.
Did you just cut Sam Alvey from the UFC and not tell anybody?
He's got a fight coming up.
I know, but you talked you talked as if his career was over. You were like, Sam Alvey's career was great. He made a living beating, like, he's fighting. He's going to lose.
Great. My point is that, you know what I mean? Those guys who just kind of stay in the middle and, seem to have fight after fight after fight and they never go down, but they never go up. And I do believe Sam Alvey, by the way, loses his next fight, and I think that's it for him. I think 4 in a row, that's it. So I do believe this is the end of his career. I could be wrong. But when you look back on it, it's going to be one of those guys who never got near the top, but didn't lose enough to get cut until late in his career. Sorry, Sam. I like you a lot. Really nice guy.
It's interesting you have that perspective, because we often talk about guys that I feel like should go to Bellator and thrive. Right now, Sam Alvey is on the top of that, would do very well in Bellator list for me. So I'm not ending
middleweight. There's room for him. There's room for him at middleweight. At light heavyweight, I don't think so, but we'll see.
All right, moving forward, Jeremy Stephens, Calvin Kattar. I think with Kattar, you can go back again, listen to our post breakdown. He lost to a guy that I think is probably the future of the division and to beat. Just didn't look all that bad doing it. And as a fact, I went back and watched that fight again, looking to study for this, and I think he actually finished. Yeah, it is. And he finishes the fight strong. So listen to that podcast if you guys get bored this week. Or shit, you should have already listened to them. You had a lot of off time. This guy's great with leg kicks, range, works well behind his jabs. Jeremy Stephens, man, what can you say about Jeremy? Always comes in forward, just kind of to be a real plotty fighter, sneaks him some flying knees, great power, and his left-hand shots. I just think that he can get picked apart here and worn down. It should be a good fight, a solid fight. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to a decision. I just don't see this being Jeremy Stephens' night.
Yeah, I think he's facing just a younger, sharper guy. I think a couple years ago, maybe I go with Jeremy Stephens. I think he's the naturally harder puncher. But Calvin Kattar is catching a Jeremy Stephens who, God love him, has been through a lot of wars. And his last few fights have shown that he's just been through a lot of battles and they're starting to catch up with him. So I think, once again, a while ago, maybe I go with Jeremy Stephens. He did finish very strong in the Yair Rodriguez fight. But I don't think he has the gas left to go with a guy like Calvin Kattar, who has good movement, has good versatility. He's building up more power as he's fighting. His last couple of fights, Chris Fishgold knocked him out, right? Ricardo Lamas knocked him out. This is a guy who had, I think, 7 decisions in a row at one point. So he wasn't known as a power guy, and he's starting to add that to his arsenal. He's starting to build up those finishing instincts. Jeremy Stephens, a better finisher in his prime for sure. But at this advanced age, I don't think he can, and I don't mean physical age, I mean fight age. I don't think he catches Calvin Kattar. I think Kattar gets a decision in this one.
I think the cuts are getting harder for Jeremy too, and at some point that's going to show up, and based on everything going into this weekend, it could be the weekend for that too.
I think we're going to see a lot of that this weekend. And the reason is that the little tiny hiccups that every fight card runs into in terms of fighter operations, meaning weight cuts, get them to the hotel, get them from the hotel to the venue. A lot of businesses in Florida are still closed. Hey, this fighter needs a last minute eye exam. Well, good luck finding an optometrist. That's, you know what I mean? Usually, okay, we got to go down to the store and get this person this. A lot of places aren't open. So each fighter, I guess, is getting their own sauna, but I don't know if those portable saunas, I don't know if they're as good. You know what I mean? There's all the little things that hey, I need Pedialyte. Well, good luck finding it right now. You know what I mean? So there are little things that are going to make the weight cutting process just more complicated and more difficult. Now, there's no one to throw in there. You can't just get somebody last minute right now. So I think we're going to might see more catchweight fights, but we're definitely see people who have trouble cutting, having more trouble because the normal infrastructure that we need to make a fight happen it isn't going to be easy. It's going to be there. It's not going to be as easy.
Those portable saunas suck. I mean, they're just awful.
That's what I've heard,
They burn like where I mean, you get a standard traditional sauna, where you're putting, water on stone or whatever. You don't get that close to the heat element. In those little zip up saunas, you're so close to that heat element. I've burnt myself in them countless times. And the other thing is, even if you put a towel around your neck to get it tight, what happens is you start to just get this stench of plastic. and it is so awful. The smell is just bad. And you have no temperature moderation. Like traditionally, you know, when you're cutting, you know, you'll go into the sauna, you'll get hot, you'll come out wrapping towels, cool for, you know, not cool, but maintain your temperature for 10 or 15 minutes, go back in. With those portable saunas, you literally go from like, I'm sweating to, okay, now I'm really overheated. So I would imagine there's probably going to be a lot of salt soaks this weekend, more than the saunas. I don't know if they would like you.
Yeah, a lot of salt soaks. Yeah, and also in a traditional sauna, you can get lower, right? If you're up top, it's hotter. At the bottom, it's lower. So another thing fighters do is you stay at the top to cut weight, and then you're like, all right, this is getting rough. You lay down on the floor where it's cooler. It's still hot, but it's cooler. You don't have that option in a zip-up sauna. So all these problems we're talking about, imagine a dozen little issues like this. That's what fighter operations is going to have to deal with. If a fighter misses a flight, which, by the way, happens all the time, there might not be one in an hour. It might be tomorrow. It might be the next day. It might be a few hours, right? Airlines just don't have as many flights. So things that would normally be like, oh, that's a pain in the ass, book him for the next flight. He can't get here till tomorrow. You know, separate weigh-ins. How long is that going to take? Little things like that are going to add up to more problems.
Well, transitioning from weight cuts beautifully, even after a month and a half off, I'd like to mention another cut here because it's what comes to mind when we talk about Francis Ngannou and Jared Rozenstruik. I mean, listen, Rozenstruik comes off the fight where he literally just cut Overeem's lip off, and I think that's what a lot of people remember. But, you know, the fact of the matter is he was losing that fight. Again, there's a back catalog of podcasts now, over a year of me and Jimmy talking about fights. And I think a lot of people forget he was losing that fight because they remember, you know, Overeem's lip more than anything else. And I think, you know, that's just a guy that comes in as a decent kickboxer, does a great job with keeping his hands up, but has not been known to keep his chin down. And I think that's going to be critical here. Ngannou, you know, obviously the less diverse striker, but naturally we know where this is going, right? Huge power. He did show a couple leg kicks against JDS. I mean, I would definitely want to give him credit for that. It looks like he was trying to become a more dynamic fighter, but, you know, we all know what he wants to connect with. And honestly, it's not like there isn't a blueprint of how to beat Francis. Stay at distance, work the leg kicks. Can you not let your confidence turn into your demise? But looking back at the way Rozenstruik fights, I mean, he just tends to walk guys down and keep his head up, and I think that's exactly what Ngannou needs, and those two things are going to meet each other relatively quickly, and Ngannou's going to get another brutal knockout in this one.
All right, I don't believe you didn't listen to my breakdown now.
I didn't. You know what?
Your word is garbage. Your word is garbage. Look, here's the deal. And also, I know you, so your word is garbage. Anyway, my point is, that's exactly what I thought. The issue for me is, and I stand behind this 100%. To me, Ngannou, even though he has improved a little bit technically with his speed and everything like that, he's MMA's George Foreman. You can outbox that guy for 12 rounds. He hits you once, and it is lights out, right? And the problem with Rozenstruik is he has to keep the pressure on for 15 minutes without falling to the knockout punch. Now, the thing is that Stipe Miocic, what did he do? He took him down. He was versatile, top pressure, right? Fought smart and respected his power the entire time. I interviewed Rozenstruik last week for MMA Tonight, and he was talking about knocking Ngannou out. He said, you know, he's got a lot of holes in his game, this, and that. And just the attitude seemed to be, I can take this guy on the feet. And I don't think that's how you beat Ngannou. I just don't think that's how you do it. Not that he can't, right? I mean, we're looking at heavyweights. Rozenstruik is a great striker in his own right. Very powerful puncher. But if that's your strategy going in, he only takes one shot and you are Pez dispensered. Just like Alistair Overeem, man. It's the guy hits scary hard in a division full of hard hitters. That's why I call him, you know, the George Foreman of MMA right now, because it's George Foreman dominated a division that had a bunch of hard hitters in it, you know, but he was the hardest hitter of them. And that's where I'd put Ngannou in that regard. So Rozenstruik, I think, as you said, you know, it's his tools are comparatively limited. He doesn't have the takedown of Stipe. He doesn't have the versatility of someone who can work the leg kicks and angle and have a savvy game plan. He's pretty young when it comes to the elite level of MMA in the UFC, right? So I just don't know if he has the skill set to outbox him for 15 minutes without Ngannou finding that knockout button, because that's what he's going to be looking for.
I would agree with you, but at the same time, where else do you expect his mindset to be? I mean, I'm pretty sure he's beaten two of the best, legacy fighters in Arlovsky and Overeem. He should be coming in with confidence. I'm pretty sure. Did he have the fight with Junior Albini where Albini looked like he was wearing a diaper? Or was it
I remember
different?
Wearing the diaper, but I don't know if that was Rozenstruik he fought.
I don't know if it was that
one. I remember the diaper. It's funny. The diaper stands out in my mind. I don't remember who Albini was fighting. Yeah, but you have to realistically understand that Alistair Overeem and especially Arlovsky were not in their physical prime. They just weren't at their best. And Arlovsky was winning that fight right up until he got hit. He was fighting a smart fight. And then, as Alistair does, he bungled it away at the end, and it cost him. So, and I'm not saying Rozenstruik can't win the fight. It's just it's going to take a patience and game playing that we haven't quite seen yet. We haven't seen that yet. Not that he can't get there, but we haven't seen it yet from Rozenstruik that he has that long-term 5 moves ahead kind of game plan that Stipe did, in my opinion, to perfection against Ngannou.
Oh boy, we're going to do a lot of boxing transitions here because Rozenstruik should be like Chuck Wepner, where on his business card he puts down Chuck Wepner put down the knockdown of Ali. Rozenstruik on his business card should be like knocked out Overeem and Arlovsky. But I want to just share with you because it's funny the way we think about it. And I thought about this myself in looking at this fight. Here we were just at what seems like 6 months ago, but probably really only about 3, looking at the Wilder Fury fight and saying, well, we know Fury has the power and Wilder has the movement. And we continued to find ways where we thought Wilder would win. And yet here we are in MMA almost having the exact opposite discussion as fans and saying, well, the guy with the big power is going to win. Of course. And I mean, I guess you could say it's smaller gloves, and that means a lot if you've ever been hit with either one of them. But why do you think it is that we so often come down to just, oh, the guy with the scary power is going to win?
Number one, that isn't always the case. I usually go with the more versatile striker. But the difference of why I see the power guy winning in this one, I thought Wilder would lose. What, 10 pro fights for Rozenstruik? I mean, in MMA, we just don't have the backlog of a guy like Tyson Fury who has outboxed fighter after fighter after fighter after fighter. We're also making these judgments on with much less evidence. We just don't know. You know what I mean? I mean, that's another big part of it is when we analyze these fights, when we talk about boxing, I mean, 20 fights, you're just getting started, right? And it's very different in MMA where someone can get to the top in MMA without dealing with a whole lot of different kind of fighters. It doesn't happen that way in boxing. Usually someone who's fighting for a heavyweight title and has 35 fights under their belt has faced big punchers before, faced a lot of big punchers because that's normal in heavyweight boxing, right? You can get to the elite level in MMA sometimes and never face one of those guys. So that's another thing. While and I've had to break down a lot of boxing and a lot of MMA, and that's something I always run into is that I've called fights in boxing where, oh, this guy's just getting started. He's 22-0 with 20 knockouts, right? I mean, it's craziness. That's a whole career in MMA. So when it comes to evaluating things, it's very different because boxers tend to, and they have amateur careers. So they've run into a lot of different styles before we even know who they are. A lot of times people learn on the job in MMA. So analyzing it is very, very different.
Very good point, Jimmy. I always wondered that we tend to have that different argument, but you're right. A lot of things factor in outside of that.
How many big punchers has Tyson Fury faced in his career? A lot. I mean, not a lot of them, of course, that punch like Wilder, but we have some idea of how he deals with that kind of attack.
Well, we don't have traditionally in MMA the softball, if you will.
Yeah, doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen. We're stacking cards after 2 months with UFC 249.
Yeah.
So moving forward, an interesting fight of Henry Cejudo and Dominick Cruz. Cruz comes in off a 4-year layoff, most recently lost to what at the time, and it's almost like when you look at Dominick Cruz, I really had to sit back and watch some fights. I believe he lost to a very different Cody Garbrandt than today's Cody Garbrandt. He does a great job of staying outside in really what would be more unorthodox then than it is now. He has really good straight punches, kicks, always puts something different. We talk about this very seldomly. He will go in and come out and show different looks every single time. And when I went back and looked at his record and his recent fights, and I mean recent is literally like 2010, there's one thing that stood out to me. When I went back and watched his fight against TJ Dillashaw, I am convinced that that is the night that TJ Dillashaw realized I need to take some type of enhancement to get over the hump that is Dominick Cruz and be a champion again. And I feel like that speaks to how good of a fighter Dominick Cruz is, and a lot of people may have forgot about that. In Henry Cejudo, obviously, former double champ, beat Marlon Moraes. Again, back catalog record on those fights. We were both really high on Moraes. But to be fair, he had a tough first round, and he just kind of outpaced Marlon. He's a world-class wrestler. I don't think that Cruz is going to want to get on the ground, but his striking has improved. The guy's won 2 championships and 5 fights in a row, no matter how cringy you find him. I guess I just have faith in the fact that this is going to be a fight where Henry can be frustrated. And with the moving in and out, I think that's going to be a big factor. I've also watched some of Henry's fights, and his lack of a game plan to deal with leg kicks is a little bit concerning. So I think Henry wins this on points, but I believe a lot of people are going to be reminded that Dominick Cruz was a world-class fighter and can still walk into an octagon and be a world-class fighter.
I really believe, I wouldn't doubt his world-classness. My issue is all of the X factors are stacked against Dominick Cruz. All of them. 3.5 years off, 4 years since he won. Now he's used to long layoffs. He's had 9 fights in 10 years. That's lunacy. 9 fights in a decade. He averages less than a fight a year. So he's used to layoffs and coming back and looking comparatively good. But he's coming off a loss, a one-sided loss. That doesn't bode well for the future. He's getting older, so these comebacks get harder and harder and harder to do. He didn't have a full camp, meaning he didn't have the time to get his cardio up. He's always been a cardio freak. His timing's not going to be as good. He doesn't have as many training partners. So the things that would make me feel better about him coming back aren't there. A style like Dominick Cruz requires a lot of training because you're always moving around. You're always cutting different angles. You're always getting and giving different looks. That requires a lot of work in the gym. And he just didn't have time to do that. And he lives in Southern California, which is shut down. So Alliance, where he normally trains, he couldn't get a full camp there. Meaning, I'm not saying he wasn't working with his normal strike, Eric Del Fierro and those guys, but usually he's working with 10, 15 different guys. He wasn't doing that. So all the intangibles, to me, favor Henry Cejudo. And that combined with everything else, I give Henry Cejudo once again the edge. I think he wins by decision. Cruz is going to want Henry Cejudo to fight an emotional fight. And if Cejudo can master his emotions, he can win a decision. If Cruz gets him frustrated, as you said, gets him maybe a little angry, gets him maybe a little wading in looking for the knockout, I think Cody Garbrandt, when he would knock down Dominick Cruz and pose and shit like that, people saw that as showboating, which it was. I also believe it was smart. Hurt him, don't go after him. Don't dive after him. Don't get reckless. Don't get overextended. Don't let a crafty veteran like Cruz counterpunch you coming in. So it's so funny that I pointed out and people were like, oh no, he was just showboating. I said, no, I know he was showboating. That's true. But I think there was a strategy behind that a lot of people don't appreciate. Hurt him. Don't go crazy trying to knock him out. And if Cejudo can follow that, a similar strategy to that, don't get overextended. Don't get emotional. Don't try to look for the highlight knockout here. He can win.
It's interesting that you put so much into the time off that Dominick Cruz had and the injuries. And there's, obviously that's justified. But he's also walking back in to a co-main event. And you also have to look at Tony Ferguson then in that same light. And I don't see a lot of people sharing that argument of, Tony's a guy that's fought literally once a year the past 3 years. And there's been injuries there. And, obviously those are all things that we have to consider. But we use that to transition into the main event, Gaethje versus Ferguson. Obviously, Tony meant to fight Khabib here on a 12-fight streak the last time we saw him. It's interesting. Last time we saw both of them wins over Donald, as we'll refer to him here. I think with Tony, again, we know what to expect. Constant forward pressure, fights well behind his jab, blends in lead elbows. I mean, beautiful lead elbows. Very instinctive, especially when it comes to the spins. I think maybe not talked about as much, but does a great job attacking the body with side kicks and wearing a fighter down. But I went back and looked at the Anthony Pettis fight, and he can show still some weaknesses in terms of being hurt. Now, he also is a guy that has a perception that he fights stronger or gets stronger later in fights. I think sometimes when, there's blood in the water to a degree, Tony fights better. With Justin Gaethje, again, coming in off that win over Donald himself. And to me, he's really rebounded from, a 2-fight skid against some higher level guys. And he seems to be a lot more tactical. I actually, if you, again, check the back catalog, made sure I got to see Justin Gaethje in person when he fought Edson Barbosa. And I've really seen a guy that's matured and improved, coming from, the World Series or, whatever you want to call it now. But everything centers around his power, hooks, elbows, the wrestling. We always talk about it. He can wrestle just about anyone in the division. He chooses not to. And, this could be almost a pick'em fight. It's a hard one to call. I am going to give this one to Tony simply because I feel like he does have a more versatile attack. And although my heart wants Justin to win, I fear that he is going to be overcommitted to hunting a knockout and go back to, kind of the fighter we saw lose against Eddie Alvarez, where you just get a guy that's a little bit better than him in the striking department, and you worry about where he's going to go mentally. Although I would love to see him shoot a single leg to take this one and see where it goes right away, right?
Yeah, but he's not going to do that.
I know. We can wish, we can dream.
For a couple of reasons. Number one is he just doesn't do that. Secondly, he doesn't want a long fight. I think we're going to see a throwback Justin Gaethje in that his ability to kind of set up his shots that we saw against Vic, that we saw against Barbosa, against Donald. I don't see him doing that. I think he rushes in a bit. I think he's been very honest about it. He has about 2.5 good rounds in him with a short camp. What isn't getting enough press, in my opinion, is Ferguson has to have a long camp. He was supposed to fight April 18th, and he's had to kind of stay peaked for another 3 weeks. That's a long time. That's hard on your body. And so this may be a gut pick more than a brain pick, but I'm going with Justin Gaethje simply because of that defensive vulnerability of Ferguson. I think we get maybe if Ferguson might be a little bit worn out from having to train as long as he's had to, the emotional roller coaster I'm sure he's been on. You're going to fight, you're not going to fight, you're going to fight, you're not going to fight. Gaethje has had to deal with a lot less of that. He hasn't had to deal with many press conferences, anything like that, right? I'm jumping in and letting it all hang out. I think there's less pressure for Justin Gaethje. I think he comes in relaxed. It's the kind of fight he wants, which is an early firefight. I think Tony gets drawn into that kind of fight, and Gaethje finds the button. That's how I see this fight ending.
It is a dream scenario for Justin Gaethje, a guy that overcame a lot. A lot of people didn't want to see him in the UFC. I remember reading in the underground and the forums and things like that. Didn't think that he had the credentials. Didn't think he had the skills. When he got there, he was met by a lot of resistance. The infamous, press conferences where Michael Johnson, he turned James Vick into a rainbow. But, they constantly down-talked him that he didn't belong there. So you're right. There's a lot to this. This would be a ultimate point in I belong here, and I just beat one of the top in the division, and now I will go fight the top in the division. And I think it was a great decision for him to take this fight from a guy that historically doesn't take last-second fights. But again, I trust in everything that you said, and there's a lot of validity to what Tony Ferguson has had to go through emotionally just with the Khabib fight in its own, in having the mental loss of that fight. It's almost like we talk about this fight as a person, right? Like this fight is become more than just a fight. It's become something that we all kind of wanted to see. And part of my heart going with Tony knows that if Gaethje wins this fight, we probably lose any luster or maybe even any chance of having Khabib and Tony fight, because you've put a ripple in the matrix, right? Like now Tony's not going to come in, right? Like, no, the simulation has broken. This is not the way it was supposed to be. We take for granted that Tony will win these fights. So I would say a lot of a lot of money rests on this fight, and the UFC, as painful as this is to say, would probably be in a better position if Justin Gaethje lost this fight.
That is true. And a lot of people, I think, are taking that to heart, and it's influencing how they see this fight because they really want to see Khabib Tony. As cursed as it is, people really want to see it. And if Justin Gaethje wins, that probably goes out the window. And I've had some people on my page talk about, well, if they fought and Gaethje wins, let's say Gaethje does knock Tony out. Oh, man, could we still see Khabib Ferguson? You could see anything. You never know. There are no checks and balances in the sport. Conor could always cut the line. You have no idea what's going on. But the chances of that fight happening go down significantly. And I think a lot of people just don't want to see that happen. They love Justin Gaethje, but don't want to see something happen again with Khabib Ferguson and see that fight get shelved.
I think it'll happen. I mean, the UFC is always going to want to print money. It won't have the same meaning. And that's what matters to me, is the meaning of the fight. The build-up of a fight that we all feel, I mean, just to be honest, we all feel like we're owed it at this point. I'm sorry. As greedy as that sounds and as one-sided as that makes me, I feel like I am owed this fight now, but I want, when it happens, for it to be the most meaningful fight possible. And a loss to Justin Gaethje here takes a lot of importance out of it for me. And, you know, that's all there's. But then, you know, the other side of that, it should, you know, Tony win, as I predicted, as you went against me, which ironically enough, as soon as you started to talk negatively about what I was watching your video, we just went the opposite way on everything. So maybe you should have done that earlier in the show. But if Tony wins, I mean, if Tony wins, strap a rocket to that fight, and it becomes right away the second biggest fight that we would, or I guess, what would it be? The sixth biggest fight that we would want to see? Because it would be the fifth or the sixth time this has happened.
Oh yeah. It would be, oh God, it'd be once again the fight to make and the top of everyone's mind in MMA, and everybody kind of wet themselves and talk about the MMA gods and all this stuff. So, you know, it's what everybody would want to see. And I genuinely hope it happens. I still think, you know, may the best man win. And, you know, I think Justin Gaethje finds that shot, but man, I could be wrong. I'm torn on a lot of these fights, and that's a good thing. It means they're close and they're well matched and all that stuff. So it's going to be an interesting night for sure.
Well, if you looked at the comments on the last video, people were very upset that we continued to talk about the illness and everything, so I saved it for the end. But we got all the way through this, and if you hear this, if Jimmy gets this uploaded on May 5th, then if you wait about an hour and a half and you haven't heard any negative news, you are welcome. We have ensured that this fight card happens. However, generally speaking, anytime we've done this, immediately thereafter, I've had to text you and be like, hey, we're going to have to re-record that. Something bad just happened.
We'll try not to jinx it.
We're going to try. So here we go, MMA gods. We're not in the best terms because we didn't get Khabib Tony, but you gave us this, so at least you tried. We appreciate you guys checking this out, and we will be back literally, like when I say shortly, I mean like in a couple days with more commentary.